Listen, God is telling me that if you don't let me take all of these nuns into the woods with our dowries to start our own convent, then he's gonna get really mad at you. And you don't wanna see God when he's angry. So you better let me go or else. Welcome, friend. I'm TK, your tour guide to the past, and you are listening to For the Love of History, the podcast where we talk about world history, women's history, and weird history. Hildegard von Bingen is a name that gets tossed around the internet and Music History 101 classes, as well as the halls of many a Catholic church, and that is one weird Venn diagram. And I've come across her name several times as a former Catholic girly who's gone through communion and confirmation and all that other fun Catholicism stuff, and I just thought that she was some nun who made music on the occasion, and her story really didn't interest me. But when request after request came flooding in during last year's History Besties census, I had no choice but to do an episode on her. And Lord Almighty, I have never been happier to give in to peer pressure in my whole life. Today, we are looking into the woman who is definitely God's favorite and also one of the greatest chaotic good con women in history. We'll talk about her insane life in a nun box, her rock star musical career, and her very radical medical practices surrounding women's healthcare. But before we get into that, I have a teeny tiny little favor to ask you. If you're watching over on YouTube, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. We are slowly growing, but we are growing in our number of history besties that we have here, which I greatly appreciate. And if you are listening over on your favorite podcast platform, please consider leaving a rating or review because that really helps other potential history besties know that we're out here. And with that, it's time to collect your 3 beverages, as is required of any good beverage goblin. Dig into your craft or the dishes that you're doing, hop in the time machine, and let's get to it. So where did Hildegard's story begin? Well, she was born in 1098 in Bockelheim, Germany, to a family of the free lower nobility. Her father was in service to the Count of Sponheim as a knight, and her mother was born into nobility. She is commonly thought to be the 10th child, which was probably not the best of luck for anyone else, but turned out to be really great for Hildegard. You see, during this time, tithing 10% of all of your stuff was how you got in good with the big guy upstairs. And when I say everything, I truly mean everything. Tithing even extended to children in a lot of medieval services. She was therefore given to God. At the age of 8, she was sent to the Benedictine monastery in Disboldenberg. At this time, the nunneries were kind of a who's who of people because the vast majority of nuns were noble by birth. In the later Middle Ages, women from the country, gentry, and the bourgeoisie would have also had the opportunity to join convents, but women from the peasant and craftsman classes very rarely became nuns. But TK, why would that be? Did not Jesus say that all were welcome? Even the poor, the hungry, the destitute, and what have you? You are correct, dear one, and that's a great question I would love to answer. And that answer is money. Moolah. Cold, hard cash. The biggest barrier to entry into a convent was money. Parents were required to give dowries for their daughters when they entered the monastery. These dowries included lands, rents, cash, and sometimes clothes and furniture. Your parents could only offer you to the church if they had the funds. And if you've never grown up in the Catholic Church or you don't really know anything about Catholicism, these women are literally believed to be the brides of Christ. Like, they literally marry Jesus or God. I kind of forget how it works. But what do you do when you get married? You give a dowry. Now, this doesn't happen anymore, but that was the common marriage practice of the time, so that's what happened. So it only made sense for Hildegard to go to the church. Her parents had enough kids, and they had enough cash. But we can also look at the motivations for her being given to the church through another lens. She was born rather sickly, and she was also put under the care of Jutta of Sponheim, the daughter of the count that Hildegard's father was in the service of. So Their motivations could have also been something to the effect of, hey, Hildy is sick, let's set her up with a friend in a place where we know she'll be safe. But let's not give them their flowers too quickly, because Hildegard's parents not only gave her up to be a nun, but they also took a more radical step of enclosing their daughter. Now, if you're thinking, ooh, enclosure, what's that mean? It doesn't sound fun. You are correct, dear one. Enclosure is very not fun. You see, Yuta was a downer, a very no fun ever type of person, and she was an extreme practitioner of asceticism, so she believed in partaking in none of the world's pleasures, and I mean none. Zero. To the point of making one's life extremely uncomfortable. When Yuta was 20 and Hildegard was 14, they were both enclosed in an anchorage or a tomb. Volmar, a monk who was one of Hildegard's closest friends and secretary later on in her life, wrote about what life was like in an anchorage, saying that Hildegard would have lived in a one-windowed cell where her meals were brought in and refuse was taken out. She would have 1 meal a day in winter and 2 in the summer. So she was basically Edgar Allan Poe'd with 1 missing brick, basically. Not just Hildegard, but all nuns living under such conditions were often very sick and bedridden. And these conditions alone were horrible enough, but Yuta, God love her, she took it even a step further by also involving self-flagellation or whipping oneself for penance. Do you remember in Da Vinci Code? Do you remember the one scene where the guy is whipping himself naked? The guy, you know the guy. That's the scene. If you haven't seen Da Vinci Code, go watch it. It's a great movie. Anyways, she also refused to wear anything on her feet when she prayed, not even in the wintertime. In Germany, mind you. In Germany. Do you know how cold it is? I know how cold it is. I lived there for 4 years. Shit was cold as hell. Cold as hell. And she was entombed in a stone room. Ain't no insulation up in there. Her tootsies must have been little popsicles. But she refused. She refused to wear shoes, and she also refused hearty meals that were given and recommended to sick nuns to help them heal. But she was like, absolutely not. None of that for me. Thank you very much. But her efforts were not in vain, I guess. And later she was rewarded by becoming the abbess or head nun of Disboldenburg, which is snaps for you, girl, I guess. Good for you. Now, we don't think that Yuta made Hildegard do all of this self-flagellation business, but we do know that Yuta was Hildegard's teacher. She taught her how to read the scriptures, service books, and music that were required by nuns of the time. She also taught her how to play a 10-string psaltery, which is kind of like a triangle harp type instrument. And I'll play a few bits of a song for you because it's so pretty. It's a really interesting instrument. So here goes. Music by Keisuke Taoshima. That was fun. Anyways, beyond what Yuta taught her, Hildegard was also given an education in Latin, which went well beyond what most nuns would have had. And ever the go-getter, Hildegard put that learning to good use and was evidently a prolific and voracious reader. And not just of religious texts. There's also evidence that shows that she would have read Greek and maybe even Arabic medical texts, which is fucking sick. That's so cool! Those kinds of books would not been given to her under the tutelage of Yuta, but rather the monks of the monastery. At this time, nunneries and monasteries were not only the refuge of the religious, but also of intellectuals. So Hildy would have been in a very unique position to learn from a bunch of different people. One would think that being entombed would be kind of like a death sentence, a severance to your connection to the outside world, but being enclosed with Utah brought a pretty interesting side benefit. Utah was well known for being a mystic. During this part of the Middle Ages, the Catholic Church and magic were pretty intertwined unless you were found to be a witch, and then in that case, it was a big no-no and bad news bears for you, but thankfully, Utah was not considered to be a witch. Apparently, she was not able to kiss any cat buttholes inside her tomb. So people would make a pilgrimage to her from all over Europe to talk to her from outside her small cell and learn about her visions from God. In this way, Hildegard was exposed to a greater variety of people than other enclosed nuns of her time. And one might think that you are not able to speak to anyone as an entombed nun, but that couldn't be farther from the truth. You could take counsel from people through the little cloaca of your tomb. And if you didn't get that joke, let me explain. I am a bird nerd, and if you didn't know that the body part of a bird where the egg and the caca come out is called the cloaca. It's very interesting. So I thought it would be a funny joke because that hole is where their food comes from and their poop goes out. I don't know if I'll keep that in. Anyways, Hildegard was not only exposed to a bunch of different people, ideas, and education, but she also learned something about the importance of image and leadership, which would help her greatly in the future. And in my opinion, it was the catalyst to her extraordinary life. Unfortunately, in 1136, Utah passed away. And just a wild side note, when they were washing Utah's body to be buried and stuff like that, they found out that she had been wearing chains that had cut into her body so that she was always in pain. Nobody asked her to do this. This was a thing that she just elected to do. I don't know if heaven is real, but sweet Lord Sobek, I really hope that she is there because girl was a hardcore believer. Lordy, but I digress. At the time of Utah's death, two very important things happened for Hildegard. Number one, she was now free to leave the anchorage, which she had lived in for 24 years. And she was elected to be the new head nun by the group of oblates and nuns that had come to learn under Utah, because apparently you could also teach people when you were in an anchorage. The more you know. Anyways, and in a moment that would change the trajectory of her whole life, Hildegard let it be known that she too received visions from God. In fact, her visions started from the age of 3 and included great bursts of stars and the voice of God. Was she influenced by Utah? Were these visions real? Who knows? There have been lots of attempts to explain Hildegard's visions as migraines with aura or some kind of sickness, because she'd often be too sick to move from her bed after receiving them. But to be perfectly honest with you, the validity of Hildegard's visions is not what I'm particularly interested in. Frankly, I don't give a damn. Her visions were a net positive to the world, and she was helping people out with them. So, you do you, girl. You do you, boo-boo. And honestly, it doesn't matter if they were real or not, because the consequences of said visions were very real. What I think makes Hildegard a true visionary is that she knew how to leverage her visions for greater freedom for herself and the nuns that she was in charge of. Now, an argument can be made if she was doing the leveraging of her own fruition or if it was really God telling her. Again, don't care. But Hildegard is the perfect example of Delulu is the Solulu regardless. She believed in her visions so much that she sought and was granted permission from Pope Eugenius III to widely publish her visions in 1148. She was like, this shit is fire. Other people need to know about this. This shit is fire. Excellent pun, me. For those of you that are listening, I'm wearing a crown of fire right now, so it was a hilarious joke. Anyways, one of the most notable things about Hildegard's vision is that they were not selfish. Nay, nay, dear one. Fame alone was not her aim. It was all well and good that her visions were widely circulated, but that was not her end goal. Around this time, she also asked to move herself and the nuns away from Disbodenberg and away from the influence of the monastery, which, okay, let's have some context right now. She wanted to take herself and all of her 20 some odd sisters into the woods, away from everything, take their dowries with them, and just vibe out with Jesus girls only style. That's what she wanted to do. And to have nuns move away from an attachment to a monastery to live on their own was virtually unheard of. And the abbot of the Disbodenberg monastery was like, no, absolutely not, Hildegard. What do you mean you want to move out in the middle of nowhere by yourselves, just a bunch of women? That's not happening. God definitely did not tell you that. And Hildegard was like, yes, he did. God told me in my vision that I needed to move all the nuns to our own place. And if you don't let me do it, he's going to punish me. Okay, so whatever happens next is your fault. And the abbot was like, get out of my office, okay? You're dumb. This is not true. You're just a silly little girl. And Hildegard said, bet. I'll teach you to question God's word through me. And she immediately took sick. She immediately was sick and bedridden. She could not move. She slept all the time. She was just invalid little lady. Until the abbot was like, fine, okay, you can go. I give you my permission. And then miraculously, she popped up and was like, okay, time to go, lady. Oh my, I love her. God, I love her so much. So immediately after that, Hildegard, with about 20 nuns and all of their dowries, all of that money, land, rent, clothes, and furniture, left. They all left to establish their own convent in Rupertsberg in 1150. Hildegard von Bingen was about 52 years old when she did this. She said, peace out, bitches. I'm 50, fit, and thriving. I'm gonna do whatever the hell I want. And we love that for her. 52-year-old Hildegard von Bingen and 20 other nuns peaced out and left the monks, except for Voldemar. He went too. He was the random man that was there because nuns couldn't take confessions, so they needed at least one guy. So Voldemar went with them, took their confessions, and then he was also Hildegard's secretary, which is so good. I love that. And now, in her new convent, Hildegard had the freedom, the time, and the space to really break out into stardom. In very Hildegardian fashion, she not only built a convent, but it was like a nice convent. She said, I've lived in a box for 24 years where I had to send my poop out of a little hole in the wall, so I'm gonna have indoor plumbing. And indoor plumbing she had because this new convent had one of the earliest designs of bringing fresh water through pipes. Love that. Women in STEM. Anyways, with her indoor plumbing and freedom acquired, Hildy set forth to finish her book called Scivias in 1151 to 1152, around about that time. Scivias is a theological book all about her visions. It's broken up into 3 parts with 35 beautiful illustrations of her visions, one of which I am cosplaying as today, this illumination right here, where she's receiving a message from God and flames are touching her head, thus the flames. Anyways, in the final portion, she also included 14 songs that she composed, as well as an early version of her musical drama, Ordo Virtuum, which is the earliest known example of a morality play, which is very exciting. This book became very popular within the church and was widely read, even by the Pope himself. The Pope was a stan. The Pope loved Hildy, okay? And because of this, she became the first woman to be recognized as a prophetess by the Roman Catholic Church. She's killing it. She's just amazing. This book really kickstarted her musical career because they were just straight bangers. And just like pretty much everything about her, Hildegard's music was very unique for its time. As an optimistic first-year university student, I took Music History 101 at 8 a.m., which was a huge mistake because the very first genre of music that we covered was Gregorian chants and other medieval religious music. And no hate to the monks, but I slept through the entire week until Hildegard's music came bumping out of the lecture hall speakers. And I thought to myself, what delightful little ditty is this? Her music was the lone bop in a sea of identical monotony. In general, plain chant and Gregorian chant has a predictable formula and generally falls within the range of a fifth. But Hildegard's songs push against those vocal boundaries, sometimes even pushing the range to 2.5 octaves, which is very unusual for medieval music in Europe at this time. And if what I said doesn't make sense to you and it's all just a bunch of word salad gobbledygook, let me play 2 examples for you so that you can hear the difference. The first clip I'm going to play is a plain chant from the 1100s. And then the second clip is going to be Hildegard's song. So here is the first. Music by Paul Braish and Mike Dostert. Audio uploaded by Fred Amos. And this is Hildegard's. Do you hear the difference? The range that the singers are reaching? The pace is different. The mood is different. It's got a different souse to it. Another incredibly cool thing about Hildegard's music is that she was one of the few composers of plain chants at the time who wrote both the music and the text. So she was like a biblical bard, if you will, and I absolutely will. Her book of music became somewhat of a viral hit and was widely popular for the time. And if Book Talk had been around during the Middle Ages, the girlies would have been eating that shit up. So many cool edits would have been made of Hildegard von Bingen's book. But since there was no such thing as Book Talk, it was copied and recopied and passed around. And as her fame grew, so did her repertoire of music. And she continuously composed new songs, which culminated in the collection called Symphonia, which is 77 works, including hymns, symphonies, responsories, which is like a type of like call and response chant, sequences, and more. It also contains the final version of Ordo Virtuum, which would have been performed in Hildegard's time at her convent by mainly nuns and noblemen with their hair out. Scandaloso. Escandaloso. You didn't get your hair out. Oh my lord. So singing with your hair out, crazy. But in a move of ultimate trolldom, she made the only male character in the performance the devil, and Bolmar was that character. and he is the one character that doesn't sing, but just like yells a lot. So all of these beautiful ethereal women with their hair out, just singing the most angelic shit you have ever heard. And then there's Bolmar, just grumpy as shit, yelling at stuff. And I really need you after this episode, please, to listen to the whole thing. I've linked it below. It is amazing. You will weep. You will weep and get goosebumps because it's amazing. Ordo Virtuum is composed of 18 people. There are 17 female solo singers that play the virtues of humility, the queen of virtue who comes out first, hope, chastity, innocence, contempt of the world, which is a virtue I am particularly good at, celestial love, discipline, but the name discipline is like scratched out in the manuscript, and honestly, I get that. Same. Modesty, mercy, victory, discretion, patience, knowledge of God, charity, fear of God, obedience, and faith. Hildegard completely changed the game for music and performance and really became the giant whose shoulders musicals have come to stand on. The people honestly couldn't get enough of her, and we know that she was so popular because of how much of her work survives. There are more surviving chants by Hildegard than any other composer in the Middle Ages, which is astounding considering women were not exactly given the freedom of creative expression at this time. And by a lot of not. And by not a lot, I mean like nearly zero. Hildegard was truly a rock star, and like any good rock star, she toured, or at least the Middle Ages version of touring. Obviously, Hildegard was still a Catholic nun. She's still, mind you, she's still a nun in her 50s, almost now 60s at this point. So she couldn't have too much fun. God had to come first, but everyone really wanted to see her live. So to skirt around this rule, Hildegard was given special permission to preach, and that preaching included, of course, a musical bit. And I cannot stress enough how crazy this was, because it was unheard of for any woman, even a nun, to be preaching. Her first tour was in 1158, which would have made her about 60 years old. She went on her first European tour at 60 years old. So let this be a reminder to you that age does not matter, and you can do whatever the fuck you want at whatever age you are. Okay? Okay. Keep that in your noggin, all right? So she went on 3 more tours throughout Germany, which is not bad for someone who started out as a child, given up for an enclosure, and spent 24 years in a tiny box with a massive Debbie Downer. But not everything was smooth sailing for Hildegard, of course. She did have her fair share of ops. There were certain factions in the Catholic Church who believed someone who had been enclosed probably shouldn't be walking around freely, but her fame couldn't be contained, okay? People yearned for her music. It is no exaggeration, nor stretch of the imagination to say that Hildegard was truly the world's first rock star. She checks all of the boxes. She put out banger after banger. She went on tour, and she had fans who wrote her fan mail. Nearly 400 of her correspondences still exist today. And not to be an elitist, but her fans were not just your everyday Gregor or Ludwig either, okay? She was getting letters from popes, from emperors, from queens, from kings, nobility, and more. They wrote her not only for religious inquiries, but also for personal advice. She wrote to Eleanor of Aquitaine before and after she was married to King Henry II. She wrote Henry as well. At this point, I don't even know if Hildegard slept, because, my God, was she busy? What did this woman not do? She was slanging bangers, conning powerful churchmen into letting her do whatever the hell she wanted to, and she was the Dear Abby advice columnist to the elites of the elites. But this, beloved, is but a fraction of what Hildegard had up her sleeve. On top of the music, theology, philosophy, tours, and letter writing, Hildegard wrote extensively on many topics. Far too many for one podcast, but I do want to talk a bit about her book Physica, which was written between 1151 and 1158. Many monasteries and convents in the Middle Ages were like a one-stop shop for learning, getting right with God, and making sure that you didn't go see him too soon. Lay people who needed medical help would go to a monastery or convent to receive treatment. So Hildegard would have had firsthand experience caring for the sick and injured. Being the philanthropist girly pop that she was, her original intention with writing Physica was likely to help teach nuns how to care for the ill. And as we have come to love and expect from Hildegard, she went above and beyond because, my lord, was she thorough in her writing. Physica is a thick, with 2 C's, book. Hildegard devoted 230 chapters, not pages, on plants, 13 chapters on elements, 36 chapters on trees, 226 chapters on minerals, and then 165 chapters on animals, and an adorable 8 chapters on metals. All the chapters discuss the various medicinal properties of everything, quite literally everything, which is so cool. When examining this book, we have to keep in mind that Hildegard was writing with medical knowledge of the time. So there is a lot of discussion of humors and how hot or cold things affected various humors, but we simply cannot dismiss it because this work also legitimized women's knowledge of herbal remedies, which was looked down upon by many male authorities, in no small part due to certain Greek and Roman philosophers whose names shall not be spoken right now, okay? But as far as she was concerned, the people needed this knowledge, and so the poo-pooers could GTFO. Being the Energizer Bunny and obviously God's favorite, Hildegard took her medical marvels one step further and wrote a book called Cause et Cure, The Cause and the Cure, about how to diagnose patients depending on their symptoms. She wrote extensively on all kinds of ailments. I'm talking dental, skin, organs, women's health. She believed that the brain was the center of life and that the nerves, as they passed from the brain through the body, were the manifestations of human life, which is insane. Having never, to my knowledge, opened up a human body and looked inside at all the different little bits and bobs, she pretty much nailed how the brain and the nerves work. A philosophical argument for sure can be made about how human life manifests, but the brain is where I am placing my philosophical bets. She also has a bunch of chapters on what we now call psychology. She talks about both normal and abnormal psychology and how mental illness could manifest as obsession, anger, frenzy, despair, insanity, and dread. She also talked about how physical ailments could cause mental instability. For example, she says, quote, "When headache and migraine and vertigo attack a patient simultaneously, they render a man foolish and upset his reason. This makes many people think that he is possessed of a demon, but that is not true." Tell him, Hildy. Tell him, girl. Just because you're having a little down day does not mean that you are possessed by a demon. No exorcism needed, my friends. She's just based as hell. She also believed in the importance of something she called greenness, or being connected to nature for health. Remember how I tell you to touch grass all the time? Well, Hildy was saying the exact same shit. And having lived in Germany for 4 years and also having 2 German aunts, shout out Aunt Ellen and Ines, that is the most German-coded thing I have ever heard. You know how many times in my life I have been asked, "Have you made sport today? You must do sport. We must go out and do sport. We must go to a hike. We must make sport. We will bring Brötchen and beer, and we will have our sport, and then we will have our beer, and then we will have our Brötchen at the top of the mountain." Just me? I'm having flashbacks right now, but I digress. In all seriousness, and in my personal opinion, the most important part of Hildegard's legacy is as follows, and I need you to lock in, beloved, listening ears on, okay? Because you have a mission to spread this little fun fact around the world like the sweet little history goblin that you are. So, Hildegard was nothing if not a girl's girl. She was for the girls. And I am 1,000% sure that she would also be for the dolls if she was here in 2025. Hildegard was so much for the girls that she knew that abortion was healthcare. And she wrote about several abortives in her books. Unlike our pharmaceutically dubious friends in the last episode, Hildegard's remedies contained no magic and also no excrement, no crocodile poop for contraception. Thank God. According to Olivia Campbell, the author of Women in White Coats, How the First Women Doctors Changed the World of Medicine, quote, in the books, Hildegard makes 437 claims of medicinal uses for 175 different plants. She describes the use of several botanical emmenagogies or menstrual stimulators. I'm not sure if that's how you say that word. It is a word that I have only read. Anyways, and abortificants. Asarum, white hellebore, feverfew, tansy, olister, and farn. Many of the plants and remedies that she suggests in her books have been proven by modern pharmacology to be effective abortives. But I must warn you, please, 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 do not take her words as actual medical advice now. Not even in a pinch, not even in any situation, because we do not know the amounts that she used. That was not written down. So you could really hurt yourself. So please do not take this or Hildegard's words as medical advice, okay? Don't do that. Please and thank you. Anyways, Olivia Campbell goes on to say that in the case of Asarum, also known as European wild ginger or wild spikenard, she, Hildegard, explains, quote, a pregnant woman will eat it either on account she languishes or she aborts an infant, which is a danger to her body, or if she has not had a menstrual period for a time period so that it hurts. Okay, let's circle that back really quick. Pregnant woman will eat it, either on account she languishes or she aborts an infant, which is a danger to her body. Back in the 1100s, Hildegard knew that abortions are health care, that alleviating pain and saving the life of a woman were important and abortion necessary. And I'm just going to let that sit. I'm going to let that marinate, okay? All right. So, how did a nun, a woman who was not supposed to even think about sex, gain such a vast knowledge on this particular section of reproductive health? Great question. I'd love to answer. Let's circle back to Hildegard's curmudgeonly but pious friend, Jutta. Remember how Jutta taught Hildegard how to read Latin, and then she learned from the monks as well? Great. I knew that you would. So we don't know for sure because Hildegard often played down her education. It was not very in vogue for a woman to be educated at this time. So she was like, let me just keep this at arm's length. No, I'm not that great. But she was that great. But we can assume that one of the texts that she read was De Materica Medica, which was written by our good Judy, Dr. Penny, aka Dr. Pedanius Dioscorides. And I know you remember him because you listened to the last episode wherein I told you that his book was used for 1,500 years like some kind of medical and pharmacy Bible. Look at us all full circle up in this season. It's almost like I planned it. Anyways, De Materia Medica contains several remedies for abortives, so she most likely learned it from there. And in addition, Hildegard was a woman of the people, and she would have had intimate knowledge of the folk medicine that women had been passing along. These abortives would have been considered standard medical knowledge for the time. And while the church did run by the standard that abortion was a sin, there was an exception. If you happen to get an abortion before the quickening, which is the first movements of the fetus, which we now know is around about 16 to 24 weeks. If you had an abortion before the quickening, it wasn't a big sin, it was a little sin. All you had to do was a year of penance, and then you and God would be squaresies. And in addition to that, to the quickening rule, it was also generally believed that the woman's life was more important than the fetus. It was not uncommon for people in the Middle Ages to view abortion as healthcare, which it most certainly unequivocally is. And I need certain politicians to fucking get with it on that. But before I get too riled up, let's move on to something a little bit nicer. All right. Within her writings on medicine and healthcare and music and visions, Hildegard left us with some of the most beautiful quotes that I believe ring true nearly 900 years later. And I'd like to read two of them to you that I think really speak to who Hildegard was as a person. The first quote is, "We cannot live in a world interpreted for us by others. An interpreted world is not a hope. Part of the terror is to take back our listening, to use our own voice, to see our own light." And the next one, which is my personal favorite, "Dare to declare who you are. It is not far from the shores of silence to the boundaries of speech. The path is not long, but the way is deep. You must not only walk there, you must be prepared to leap." By the time she died in 1179, she was famous as the Sibyl of the Rhine. Hildegard was considered a saint for many centuries before she was officially canonized in 2012. And if I have learned anything from Hildegard, it would be that I really need to limit my screen time, because if I want to accomplish half of the things that she did, I need to cut back on the doom scrolling, which is making me think that maybe I should become a nun. Would that be crazy? I've already got the outfit. But in all seriousness, I think Hildegard really teaches us that we have a capacity for learning far greater things than we give ourselves credit for. That religion and science need not be in conflict. And that telling people a little white lie to get what you want isn't all that bad. Especially if it's done to help you and your 20 best friends move to the woods and start a rock opera. Well, dear one, we have come to our final thought today, and I just got to tell you about Hildegard and beer. In the most Germany of German things, Hildegard von Bingen is the first person to write about the fermentation of beer. And in her various teachings, she has 7 benefits of beer that I'm going to tell you about right now. In her book, Cause et Cure, Hildegard wrote, "Beer positively affects the body when moderately consumed. Beer fattens the flesh and lends a beautiful color to the face." And then proceeds to list 7 other benefits, which include increase in bone density, anti-inflammatory properties, cancer-fighting properties, cardiovascular health, reduced risk of kidney stones, digestive health, reduced risk of Alzheimer's. And well, Hildegard, she's correct marginally, okay? Beer can help with some of these things, but not when drunk to excess, okay? So I'm gonna tell you to take what Hildy says with a grain of salt, okay? A pinch of salt, maybe even a whooping heap of salt, okay? Because she's, beer helping to increase bone density? I guess so. But also, what are the dosages for this? We don't know. But I thought that was a fun little factoid to end the episode on. And with that, we're gonna bring this episode to a close. Thank you so much for watching today, especially, those delicious donuts that listen and watch to the end of the episode. I cannot tell you how much I appreciate you for choosing to spend these 30 to 40 minutes with me, listening and learning and doing stuff. So I appreciate that so much. It is a great way to support the podcast. And if you'd like to support the podcast in other ways, you can join us over on Patreon. You can get some merch. This is like a little sneak peek for you. It will go out in the next episode and on Instagram next week. But you get to be one of the first people to know. This month in October, we will be doing a fundraiser for MetaViver, which is 501c3 organization. It is the only 501c3 that gives money to people who are in stage 4 breast cancer, and also for men who have breast cancer as well. My very best friend in the entire world and the unpaid intern to this podcast was diagnosed with breast cancer 2 years ago at the age of 33. And thankfully, she's here. She is in remission. She's been in remission for a while, but we really wanted to do something this year to help raise money for people who aren't able to catch breast cancer earlier, which is why she chose Medivivor. So to raise money for Medivivor, we are selling these t-shirts that say Bad Bitches Cry. I created this design myself. There's long sleeves, there's hoodies, there's t-shirts, there's crop tops, and there's tote bags. So all of the profit for this merch design will go to Medivivor, so you can head down to the show notes to find that link to this particular design. So if you can help support, that would be awesome. If you can't, not a problem. Sharing the link or sharing this episode would be awesome to help out. So yes, great, thank you. That's all I have to say. I love you so much. Do something that makes you happy this week. The thing that I did to make me happy was make this fire crown. It was so fun. I had a great time. Make sure you go outside, do as Hildegard would want us to do, touch some grass, get your green on, get your water right now, take a little sippy sip. Make sure you hydrate your flesh prison, dear one. And I will see you next week when we talk about the history of cats. Okay, I'll see you later. Love you. Bye. Goodbye. So long, farewell, la vida se nadu. Adieu, adieu to you and you and you. So long, farewell, la vida se nadu. Adieu, adieu to you and you and you. Have you mocked Sport? Haven't Sie mocked Sport? Sport? Would you like some Brötchen and beer? And we make Sport? Don't forget to make Sport today. Make some Sport, dear one.